Chapter 9. I saw little of Falconer over the next 2 days. Around midday on Friday, he came to the stable where, to pass the time, I was helping the stable boy curry horses. He neither spoke nor beckoned to me, only stepped back out into the courtyard, knowing I would follow. He was even less talkative than usual. But finally, as we walked down a deserted alley, he said, "Be sure you complete your work today. We've lost our lodgings." "Lost them?" "I killed one of the other lodgers in a duel." It was several minutes before I recovered from this news enough to ask, What was it about then, the duel?" I was certain he would reprimand me for talking too much, but he did not. Instead he replied, "The man called me a filthy Jew." Something possessed me to ask, "Are you filthy or a Jew?" He sounded almost amused. "A Jew." He gave a short, bitter laugh. "There are no Jews in England, only former Jews." The sky scowled down upon us, threatening rain as we boated over to Southwark and joined the throng of bear-baiters and playgoers. At the Globe, Falconer drew me aside. "We must find a better vantage point for you, one where you will hear every word." "The galleries?" I suggested. "Among those overdressed fops and their painted doxies? You might as well go right up on the stage. Now, I've a better spot for you. Come." He led me to the rear of the playhouse, to the players' entrance. The door stood ajar, and through the crack I could just make out lines being spoken on the stage. "This is no better," I whispered. "Not here. Up there." He pointed to the stairs beside us. "Through that door. Conceal yourself behind the curtains at the rear of the small balcony." I gaped upward. "Up there? But—" His hand closed painfully around my upper arm. "And mark me, no excuses this time. I want every word set down. Understood?" Wincing, I nodded. His grip relaxed, and he pushed me roughly towards the stairs. "Go on, then." I reluctantly mounted the stairs, wondering how it was that Falconer knew this playhouse so intimately. I cracked the door, listened a moment, then peered in. The interior was dim and deserted. Apparently the ghost had already done his turn on the balcony and departed. I slipped through the entrance and pulled the door carefully closed. From that spot I could hear clearly every word spoken by Hamlet, for his voice carried well. But the speeches of the less forceful players were still lost. I tiptoed to the draperies that hung at the rear of the balcony. When I pulled back the edge of the drape slightly, I could hear well enough. I could also see the front half of the stage. Hamlet stood there, conversing with the ghost of his father. The ghost's hollow, haunting voice, a voice not unlike Falconer's, sent a shiver up my spine. I clenched my teeth resolutely, determined not to be caught up in the play again, and set to work transcribing all that had slipped by me before. Now that I knew how the story came out, I could concentrate better on my task. But I was still nervous about being discovered, and jumped at every sound. Halfway through the performance, my writing hand grew cramped, but otherwise there were no problems. I believe I still lost a line or two during the riveting fencing match, but no one would miss them. As the end neared, I congratulated myself silently, and, as it turned out, prematurely. At Hamlet's death, my work was done. I had copied the rest on my previous visit. Greatly relieved, and at the same time a little sorry because I might never have a chance to see a play again, I closed the table book and backed away, meaning to slip out as quietly as I had come in. It was then that I heard footfalls on the stairs. Not the outside steps I had used, but a steep, narrow flight rising from behind the stage. I choked back a gasp and desperately glanced about for a place of concealment. Seeing none, I ducked between the end of the drapery and the wall. There was just enough room for me to stand there without being seen by the audience, provided I did not move so much as a finger. The footsteps drew near. The drapes parted in the centre, and a man in soldier's garb stepped onto the balcony, where a small cannon stood bolted to the floor. He dumped a charge of powder down the bore of the cannon, rammed in a wad of cloth, and set a fuse in the fuse hole. As he lifted his smouldering stick of touchwood and blew on it, he caught sight of me for the first time. His eyes widened. He took a step toward me, then hesitated and glanced back at the cannon, obviously torn between apprehending me and being faithful to his cue. I started to slip away, but to my dismay, the point of the dagger in my belt snagged on the edge of the drape. I fought desperately with the fabric, struggling to free myself. The audience had now spotted me and were tittering and pointing. As the cannoneer started for me again, his cue was spoken on the stage. "Go bid the soldiers shoot." Glaring at me, he rushed to the cannon, knocking it askew in his haste, and thrust the touchwood against the fuse. Nothing happened. Furious, he blew on the wood and touched the fuse again. The cannon went off a full 30 seconds late, and the man descended on me. I gave the drapery a prodigious yank and was free. As I stumbled for the door, the cannoneer burst through the centre of the curtain and blocked my path. I looked about frantically. The only other route of escape was the inside stairs. I scrambled for them, and clinging to the rickety railing, half ran, half fell down them, with the soldier hard upon my heels. I was not quite halfway to the bottom when the burly, grey-bearded man who had played the second grave-digger suddenly appeared at the foot of the stairs. I was trapped. My only chance for escape lay in jumping off the stairs to the floor below, a fall of some 6 or 8 feet. Risky, but better to sprain an ankle than to be whipped or put in the stocks. I ducked under the railing and was about to leap when a cry rang through the theatre that stopped every one of us dead in his tracks. "Fire! Fire!" The stocky greybeard at the foot of the stairs shook a finger at me, as if to say he'd deal with me later, then hastened away. The cannoneer came thundering down the steps, but I scrambled faster than he and ran for the rear door. When I burst through, Falconer was gone. I ran on, around the side of the playhouse. People were streaming out of the main entrance in panic. The elegant ladies from the gallery scurried fearfully down the steps, hoisting their vast skirts above their ankles in an unseemly way. One was sobbing, and the tears made tracks through her heavy white makeup. I was mostly afraid of being pursued. I pushed into the centre of the noisy milling mob. Some were staring at the roof of the theatre. When I followed their gaze, I saw a thick cloud of grey smoke rising from the thatch to become lost in the darker grey of the sky. The players had set a ladder on the uppermost landing of the outside stairs, and several of them were now on the roof, beating at the smouldering thatch with their capes. A line of men, comprised of players and audience alike, formed between the playhouse and the nearest drainage ditch. They dipped up buckets of water and passed them from hand to hand along the line, up the stairs and the ladder to the men on the roof, who tossed the water onto the spreading flames. In the middle of the line, passing buckets with the rest, stood the slim boy who had played Ophelia. He was wigless now, but still in his stage makeup. Above the waist, he wore the bodice of his ladylike costume. Below it, he wore men's breeches and hose. "What set it off?" said a man next to me. "The wad from the cannon is my guess," said another. My stomach twisted. If that was so, then I was partly to blame, for I had distracted the cannoneer and caused him to misdirect the shot. I had seen buildings burn before. In fact, it was not uncommon, even in a village as small as Berwick. But I had never before been the cause. Furthermore, I felt as though it was something more than a mere building at stake. It was an entire world, one into which I had been privileged to look briefly, and which was now in danger of crumbling. So distressed was I that I was on the verge of lending my efforts to the firefighters, even at the risk of being recognized. Then someone jostled me from behind, bringing me to my senses. I whirled about, expecting to see Falconer at my elbow, demanding the completed script. But it was only a thin fellow with a red nose and a scraggly beard, smiling apologetically. "Begging your pardon, my young friend," he said, and moved off through the crowd. Now that my thoughts were on Falconer, I cast my eyes about for him. But my stature was so small and the throng so dense that I stood no hope of spotting him. I turned back to the drama being played out atop the theatre. The men on the roof were making little headway against the flames. They would, I believe, have lost their livelihood had not the gloomy sky chosen that moment to open up, dousing the burning thatch with more water than the poor players could have carried to it in a week. A cheer went up from the line of water-bearers, then from the crowd. I joined in. I was so relieved that I scarcely minded the soaking rain. I turned my face up to it and laughed appreciatively. The timing of the deluge had been so perfect. I could almost believe it was some grand theatrical effect produced by the company for our amazement. The whole world practices theatrics, I thought, and laughed again. Then, as the crowd dispersed, I caught a glimpse of a sinister figure standing at a distance, looking out over the river as before. Sighing, I moved toward him. I laid one hand on my wallet to reassure myself that the hard-won script was still safely tucked within. The pouch seemed flat and empty. My heart suddenly felt the same. I halted, yanked up the flap of the wallet and plunged my hand inside. My fingers closed on the pencil. But the table book was unquestionably, inexplicably gone.